But how? If you don't, if Spirit is the only thing, how did you learn about Christ in the first place?
Right. You can take it that point.
That's-
Well, how do you know about Christ? You have to go back to some level of truth. You have to go to some denominator. You have to go to some truth. And again, if you're going back to some truth, then you're going to a doctrine. Because the doctrine automatically brings you back to the deposit of faith. I'm done.
Didn't bother him at all.
I'm going to feel these
Didn't even break his sweat.
ruffle these feathers.
Anyone else have a comment for Justin Preacher?
I think you should go read the Bible and really read what it says,
Okay.
not his interpretation.
Okay. Anyone else?
We should invite him to one of our classes and we'll have a debate.
And we are allowed to read the Bible. We were never told we couldn't, not to read the Bible.
The reason
We make
people-
that statement.
The reason people in the Middle Ages did read the Bible is they couldn't read.
That's exactly right.
And it wasn't in print.
Right.
Tell him that he needs to study history.
So you need to go back to a known truth. Something that's known. Once you come to here, for most people, if you're a Christian, this is a known truth. It's a starting point, all right? Then you just kind of develop it. Okay, well, if this, then this. Then this, then this. And this is why I believe in what we do, because Christ gave authority to his apostles, and they had that oral tradition that was authoritative, and the Bible became authoritative. So that's why I use those as my sources. And work from there. It all comes down to authority.
Interesting that you said you were just picking a few. Because I've heard you say that too, like when people come around or they pick a few verses and they don't read it in whole, and it was interesting to hear him say that and apply it to what we're being taught.
And remember, when we do talk about individual topics, and we want to use the Bible, how many verses in the Bible do we use in a particular topic to get the full context of the issue? All of them. We can't use a couple passages to make a doctrine. We've got to use all of the passages. And sometimes in Scripture, we read Scripture, some persons say this and some say this, and they seem contradictory sometimes, but can they be contradictory? No. It's our problem that they're contradictory. It's not the Bible's. So what we need to do then is put all of them together, and together they make more sense. And that's how we have to address specific issues. Perfect example, our Mormon friends. Trust me, we can talk about more Mormon missionaries back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. They'll say this, say this, but it all comes down to authority. And really, if you say, if Joseph Smith is a prophet of God, then what he says is probably true. Right? If he is a prophet of God, then what he says is true.
Right.
But if he's not a prophet of God, then everything else after that is not true. All you got to do is show he's not a prophet of God. Then everything after that, the 5,000 other components, fall apart. Well, if you're out there on those 5,000 components, you can spend 5 years hitting every component, right? But if you go all the way back, how about this one? If Muhammad was really not a prophet of God, Islam is not true. Think about this. Was he a prophet of God?
Another holy war.
Yeah, I know. I probably have. But I'm just showing you. Authority. Come back to that. And I could have spent an hour and a half. This was off the cuff. I had no idea this was coming. There's just more, that we could develop here. But this comes into an area, it's called moral theology, morality. What's morality? Knowing the difference between right and wrong. And this addresses him. How do we know the difference between right and wrong? How do we know what's right and what's wrong?
But if someone that doesn't make it right.
Right. So who defines it? How do we know what's right and what's wrong?
Done by doctrine. Goes all the way
He would
back.
probably say the Ten Commandments, but then it's whose interpretation. I mean, like when you listen to that whole confession tape, like, the guy says, well, sure, I didn't kill anyone, but you could have killed their spirit. Or you
That's
could
right.
have-
Yeah. See, morality, determining right from wrong, is the same thing. You have to go back to an authoritative source to define what's right and wrong. And in Christianity, what's the ultimate source? Christ. That's morality. You have to go back to some sort of a source to define it. And then that leads now to another issue. It comes to truth. If we go now to an authoritative source, which is Christ, there has to be truth. So we learn there's truth in the world. Right? There has to be truth, because Scripture says, Christ, I am the way, the truth, and the light. Right? So Christ is truth. So we know there has to be something called absolute truth. Okay? And this is what Christianity is. Christianity is based on absolute truths. You ever hear the New Age movement? That's prevalent now, right? And you know what a component of the New Age movement is? It's called relative truth. What's true for you may not be true for me. You heard this?
Relativism.
That's relativism.
So you're making yourself the authority.
You are becoming now the authority, and you're not acknowledging absolute truth. And this is contrary to Christianity. We believe in absolute truth. And this is also in the Catholic Church. We really believe in absolute truths. This is something I bring up with my Protestant friends sometimes. I was just rereading an email I sent to my wife's pastor a couple years ago, just the other day. And it was a letter on the Lord's Supper. And I challenged him. You have a different belief. And he wrote back to me and he says, well, some traditions like you believe it really is the presence of God. Other traditions, such as the Lutheran friends, they believe that Christ is really present only while the worship service is going on. There are other worship groups that believe that Christ is just spiritually present. And there's others like ours that believe it's just a symbol. And he says, that's okay. And I wrote back to them, then you're a New Ager. You don't believe in absolute truth. You cannot have it be really the body, blood, soul, and divinity of Christ. Only the body and blood of Christ when worship's going on. Spiritually present. Or symbolic all at the same time. They can't all be true. Right? That's relativism.
Did he respond to you?
I don't recall it. See what I'm getting at? And that's why the Catholic Church is, we have these parameters. And remember, because of inflation, I have now the $2,000 bet. Show me one doctrine the Catholic Church has changed in 2,000 years. It's because we believe in absolute truths, not relative truths. There can't be several different understandings of the same thing. It's contrary to everything.
That way, if you have relative truth, you can change anything you want.
Well, relative truth that says what's true for you may not be true for me. So that means it's okay if you believe it's the body and blood of Christ, but it's okay if I believe it's only a symbol. We're both okay. That's what it's saying.
It also says that whatever you believe this week, that does not necessarily mean you have to believe next week.
Right, right. And you can take it to an extreme level. You can believe that arsenic's going to kill you, and I can believe it's not going to kill me. Okay? But it's what?
It's still going to kill you.
But if I do ingest it, it's still going to kill me. Sometimes you can believe something all you want, but it doesn't make it true. It's that absoluteness of that truth which will prevail every time. Just like that arsenic. I can believe all I want, it's not going to kill me. I can believe it. I can teach other people. But if I ever were to ingest it, no matter how hard I believed it's not going to kill me, it will, because that's the truth.